Good morning, this is Faith at Faith and Books, and this is the last video I'm making in this series about the 5 R's of zero waste or low waste living. So the first R is refuse, the second R is reduce, the third R is reuse or repurpose, the fourth R is rot, and the last one is recycling. Recycling is often seen as the very first thing. Like, it's okay to buy all this packaging and stuff as long as you can recycle it, right? But recycling has been just a huge PR greenwashing thing in this country. It's a very, very inefficient, ineffective system that we have, and there's been a lot of deception. And we, as consumers, we've really been led to believe in so many ways that when we put something in a recycling bin, it actually gets recycled, and that's far from the truth. Far, far from the truth. So, again, because I'm older, I remember these things. I remember when recycling became a thing, and you used to have to sort your recycling. So you would put your newspaper and cardboard in one place, and your I can't even remember if we did cans. It was mostly paper. Yeah, I guess we did tin cans and aluminum. So, and then you had to, and then the plastic got put in another, like your milk jugs or whatever. And I cannot remember back then about glass. We used to have bottles that you could return. Like, you know, I had actually made money that way as a kid, going around. I'd find a bottle that I could return to the 7-Eleven for a deposit. I don't know when that stopped in my area. But anyway, I remember that we had to sort it. And so, you know, they even had like special trash cans that you could buy where, you know, or setups where you have, you know, different containers for different things. But then they went to something called single stream, where they thought, oh, people aren't gonna sort through their trash and pull out the recycling and divide it up. So we'll just make, you know, one can for trash and one can for recycling, and you can mix them all together and it'll get sorted, you know, wherever they pick it up. Well, or wherever they take it to. Well, that was a big fat lie, because most recycling facilities run on an extremely low budget and they could not handle it very well. So yeah, I'll get into my own experience about that. But also, one of the biggest lies was that the government decided it was okay for anything made out of plastic to have that little plastic triangle on it, which does not indicate whether it's actually recyclable or not. But it looks like it does, right? So people would just look at that symbol and they'd say, oh, it's recyclable, and they'd throw it in the recycling. And if you had a facility that couldn't sort well, they couldn't stop and look at each thing, you know, and figure out whether that particular facility could recycle that particular type of plastic, it would just get thrown in the trash. So it was just a big lie. And I remember for so many years, before I paid any attention to this, I'd be so puzzled because I would sort my recycling. First of all, they were in these open bins. So then you were told, and that you had a closed bin for your trash and an open bin for your recycling. But then we were told that if your paper got wet, you couldn't recycle it anymore. So I started putting it in a plastic trash bag, as did everybody, right? But I'll tell you the result of that. So it would be sitting out there, but only one truck would come by and dump both the trash and the recycling into the truck at the same time. And I was always like, how does that work? Well, they were just throwing everything out. It was just a big fat lie. And for years, people just like went along, and then somehow somebody started to raise a ruckus and complain. And, you know, finally we found out that, number one, they were just throwing it all away because there was no market for all this wet trash. Or if you put your recycling in a trash bag, a plastic trash bag, they weren't going to take the time to open up the trash bag and sort through it. They just threw it away. So I remember telling a friend of mine that, and she just like thinking, oh, all this time I was diligently recycling, thinking I was doing something good, but they were just throwing it away because I put it in a plastic bag. So finally, they came out with a covered container for the recycling as well as for the trash. So we didn't have these open bins anymore that were getting wet. We had a closed container, so that was good. And now this company, I don't know, how it got the funds or why it changed, but now we do have a trash truck that comes by and a recycling truck that comes by. So yeah. So now where I am, I have to contract with private companies, but there's only about 2 private companies that serve this area, and they're both terrible. Some people try to start up smaller ones to just do a particular neighborhood, like people have like little side gigs where they do that. But for the most part, you have to do 1 or 2 companies in this area, and one I thought was slightly better, but it goes up and down depending on their manpower and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so now it is better because we do have this covered bin for the recycling, but what also makes it better is it turns out that if you put glass, we were told that glass was recyclable. If you put glass in with your recycling, it ruins all of it, and it all just gets thrown in the trash because the glass shatters. You cannot have a single stream system that includes glass because of the shards of glass that inevitably happen when it gets thrown into the truck. So that was going on for a while, where we were told that we could recycle glass, and then it turned out that when we put that glass in there, it was just going to trash. So years ago, when I joined this Care for Our Common Home ministry, we went on a field trip to the recycling plant that is used by both the county or at least the city and the other private trash companies. And so it was very eye-opening. So they have this big conveyor belt, and they have people with these sticks, and they can reach in and pull stuff out that they see. So you just have these people eyeing it. They dump all the trash in, it goes on the conveyor belt, and they're sorting it, the really obvious stuff. And the smaller stuff can fall through, and the bigger stuff gets pulled to the side. So we learned that most plastics were not recycled in our county. What they recycle when it comes to plastics completely depends on the market. If they collect that particular type of plastic, plastic has all those numbers. So for a while here, the only kind of plastic that they recycle was plastic 1. And it keeps shifting. So at one point it was 1, 2, and 5. Then it was 1 for a long time, and now it's 1 and 2. But you have to keep on, what person is keeping up, like as it shifts from year to year, what kind of plastic they can put in? It's just crazy to expect us to know the difference. It's just crazy. And I heard even from somebody who is into this, is that even if it says 1, the things that they really only collect are just the jugs. They don't go for the takeout containers or whatever that might be made from 1. And also, if you have any kind of plastic that has like a hinge to it, like you get those takeout things or like salad or whatever, and you can open it up and it's got like a hinge on it. Well, that type of plastic that makes the hinge is a different type of plastic from the rest of it, and that mix renders it, unable to be recycled because it's 2 different types of plastic mixed together, and that's not how plastic recycling works. You can have a facility that works on plastic number 1 or plastic number 2 or whatever, but it can't be mixed. Also, there's absolutely no market, as far as I know, in the United States for black plastic. So any of those takeout or where you go to the grocery store and it's in a plastic container that has one of those black plastic bottoms, that you cannot recycle it. Even if it has the little recycling symbol, that does not matter, because that doesn't really tell you whether or not it's recyclable. I mean, every kind of plastic, and I'll get into using the word recyclable for plastics, but any kind of plastic could, potentially, in a perfect world, be melted down and reformed for something else. But you have to have facilities. You have to be able to actually do it. And if you don't have the infrastructure for that, which we don't, then it's not, in reality, it's not recyclable. So, yeah, so recycling for plastic has been a just deception after deception, and just a real PR thing to just pull the wool over our eyes. And we might think we're being really diligent and responsible in our recycling, and we're not. I mean, we are, but it's not helping because these people have just pulled the wool over our eyes. So, so that's a really bad situation, and that's why, even if it is getting a little bit better, and it might be getting a little bit better, it's not a constant thing because it all depends on the market. And so, the wake-up call was when China refused to take our trash, right, and most of it's plastic. And all of a sudden we didn't have the fact that we're shipping this stuff to developing countries or countries like China to get it out. I mean, that's just horrible that we have these garbage barges floating around, dumping the stuff in other places. And then we have these incredibly poor people who are garbage pickers climbing through this stuff. There are these like garbage villages where they live off of our garbage. It's just so bad. It's so, oh my gosh, I don't know how anyone sleeps at night knowing that that's how we treat other people in the world. We give them our garbage so their children can pick through it to try to find something to sell. And then of course they don't have the same standards for air pollution that we have. And so they're burning this stuff, or they're trying to melt it down, and it's all sorts of pollutants are being released into the air. It's just horrible. And it's all so that we can have, takeout food. It's just, and this highly, highly processed, horrible for our health food. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's really, when you start to think about it, to me, it's horrifying. It's really horrifying. So anyway, what was I going to say? Okay, so in my county, things are looking up. So I'll tell you the things that really are highly, highly recyclable, and you really should be recycling them. The first thing is paper and cardboard. You really can recycle that stuff. And even in my county, it doesn't even matter if you throw in something that has a little bit of plastic, they will melt it off. So if you have envelopes like the junk mail, which is another horror story, all that paper being produced for junk mail that people just automatically throw away. But like the plastic, on the envelope, the clear cover, so you can see the address. You can just throw that in, and this is in my county. You don't have to worry about pulling it off, and they can take care of it. So I heard that from the recycling people themselves. So paper and cardboard, highly recyclable. So always, always don't throw your paper in the trash. Now, if it's a napkin, a paper napkin, first of all, don't be using paper napkins. Use cloth napkins. But if you are using paper napkins, try to compost those rather than, because if they're dirty, if they have food on them. You don't want any food or anything because it'll mold, it'll mildew, it'll attract rodents, and it just makes it too hard to recycle. Also, don't let it get wet because that'll do something to it too, I guess, mold, mildew. So paper and cardboard, highly recyclable. Always recycle that as long as it's clean. Then don't put your pizza boxes in if they've got grease stains. I actually tear off the parts that don't have grease stains and put that in, and then the stuff that has grease stain, I either throw in the trash. I throw in the trash basically because I can't compost that. Anyway, so, and then the other thing that's highly, highly recyclable, and you really, really ought to recycle it, is aluminum. So aluminum is very, very destructive and polluting to extract from the earth and to create, to manufacture. But once it's manufactured, it's really, really easy to recycle. And when we went on this tour, they said that if you have some aluminum and you put it in recycling, it can be back on the shelf in the form of, say, I don't know, a soda can or something within 60 days. So there's a vibrant market for it. So there's a market for recyclable paper and cardboard, and there's a market for aluminum. Tin cans also, not quite as much as aluminum, but the harder cans are also recyclable. They're coated in plastic, so they have to melt that off. But those cans also, but you have to rinse them out. So for your cans and your, for aluminum, the only thing I really use for aluminum are sometimes a baked good or something will come with an aluminum. Or like if I get Chipotle, they have the aluminum tops. Or is it the aluminum bottoms? No, aluminum top. I just rinse those, put them in recycling. For the cans, or like my cat food cans, or like canned tomatoes, something like that, I actually have a brush, a special brush that I keep on my sink, and I scrub it out real quick and rinse it, and then put it in. It needs to dry, but I figure it'll dry by the time it's time to go out for recycling. So those things are really recyclable. So those things you should be recycling. If you don't put glass in unless you have a glass recycling facility. So we can't put glass into our single stream recycling anymore. But just a couple years ago, and this was such a good change, they started this purple, what is it called? Purple bin? Forget what it's called, but it was copied from some city out somewhere else in Omaha or someplace. They have these purple big containers, dumpsters, and you can take your glass there. And it's such a pain because glass is heavy. I have a bad back. I can't pick it up. It rolls around the back of your car. You try not to break anything. So far I haven't. And then you get there and you have to throw it in. And the sound of breaking glass when you're throwing that stuff in. I try not to break it when I put it in, but they have like this rubber flap and you slide it through and then it falls into the container. And I have to go do that before this weekend. I have a lot of glass recycling to do, but I'm so glad to do it. I really am, because glass is actually 100% recyclable, and it's something we really, really should be recycling. Especially if you're trying to buy stuff in glass instead of plastic, because it's heavier, it costs more fuel, it costs more to haul across the country or wherever. So recycling it really, really is helpful for the whole environment. So even though it's a pain, it's one of my chores. A couple times a month, I have to go take the glass recycling. I have to ask someone to please lift or maybe ask them to do it for me, or ask them to lift it into the back of the van so that I can take it to the recycling bin and do that. And I'm glad to do it, even though I will admit it's a pain. So we have the glass recycling. Plastic is, like I said, it's always changing, so you don't know. Right now there's a couple of plastic things that I throw in there. Sometimes I do have like a plastic juice bottle or something like that, a jug. Mostly I try to avoid plastic. But when when for some reason I absolutely can't, then it goes in there. But I only put in 1 and 2 because I know that that's all they're recycling right now. Because I'm aware, I often will look it up. I'll go to the website and see what numbers of plastic are actually being recycled. Yeah, so now I'm losing my train of thought. And I'm talking a long time, so I better stop. But anyway, the thing is about recycling is it really is not the first line of defense against low waste. It's often a fraud. Oh, I know, something really revelatory. We like to go to Chipotle to eat because, the food's good. It's something that my daughter who's on a restricted diet can go to and eat. And they have their cardboard, whatever, tray or dish that they use to serve their food in is truly compostable. A lot of those things are not, like kava. I question whether kava's takeout containers are actually, even though they look cardboard, I don't know if they're actually compostable. So you might have to just throw them in the trash because they're not recyclable. They have food in them, right? And then they have the plastic lid. But Chipotle has the cardboard and the aluminum lid. So if I take it home, I can and I have a compost bin, I can compost the cardboard, can wash out the aluminum lid and recycle it and know that it's recycled. So I like to eat at Chipotle for that reason. But if you throw that stuff away at Chipotle, they just throw it in the trash, at least here. I guess there aren't laws. They have a separate recycle thing, and I see people carefully sorting, they're going to put this in the recycling. But my son worked at Chipotle, and you just throw everything in the trash bin. So it's the same story as what they did for us for years, where it was just one truck that came by and collected both the sopping wet, newspaper that wasn't recyclable anymore because they gave us the wrong kind of bin, and it's the same story. They say that it looks like you're recycling and you're being good and diligent and trying to be environmentally conscientious, but you're not. So there's so much dishonesty in the whole thing. Now, maybe that's just here because we don't have laws that are stringent enough to make Chipotle bother to, actually recycle. And maybe in other places it's different. But that's the thing about recycling. It's so local and it's so variable. It changes according to the market, according to what that particular company can afford. Can they afford to hire a trash company and a recycling company? You don't know. So anyway, so the thing about recycling is you really have to educate yourself on your locality, and then you have to keep up to date on it. And so recycling is not the first line of defense when it comes to dealing with all this trash. And that's just the most important thing you need to know. You have to educate yourself. You have to do things that are a pain, like taking the glass to the recycling center. And you have to keep up to date on it if you really want recycling to be part of your strategy. And there was one last thing I wanted to say, and now it flew out of my head. And I've talked long enough. So that's the thing about recycling. That's the lowdown from my perspective. And I'll see if I can find a book to link to that explains all this. I'm reading Plastic: A Toxic Love Story, and that, as I recall, that goes into this a good deal, just what a fraud it is. So yeah. All right. And oh yeah, I should have included TerraCycle. There is a private company, TerraCycle, I've talked about in earlier videos, that is trying to make a difference with plastic recycling. And also your plastic shopping bags, you can, I don't know if it's every place, but here you can take it back to the grocery store and they'll transform them into Trex, those Trex. It's not ideal. We don't want plastic. Plastic is very, very harmful. We only want to use it when it's absolutely necessary, like medically. And we need to find better alternatives for everything else. All right, I will talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.